Great.
Great that you had some time to talk to me tonight, because I have a bunch of questions for you. And a couple of
Okay,
people sent me questions too.
great.
So I threw those in there to ask you. So,
Wonderful, wonderful.
how you got into music. I did read your bio and stuff. So, if you want to give me just a brief summary, that'd be perfect.
Okay. I apologize in advance. We will be interrupted by cats who like to be
That's
part of this.
perfect.
So like a brief summary of just like my musical life or
Yeah, like how did you start to get into it and what made you inspired to pursue it?
sure. Well, okay, so I grew up with a family that like never pressured me in the direction of music at all, but it was just always something that was like around and valued, like art of all various forms were. So, like, my mom would take my sister and me to the ballet. I remember my parents playing records, anything from like, reggae to Beethoven. So that was always sort of around. And then we had a policy, like my dad had a policy that anytime my sister and I wanted to rent any musical instrument, basically he'd just rent it from the local music store and let us mess around with it. So my first instrument that I took lessons on was piano when I was really little, like 5. And then when I was like 10, I played the flute for a couple of years. But then I would rent, just like, hey, I want a clarinet this month. I want a trumpet this month. And my dad would rent that for us. So it was really like when I was a teenager that I got into like rock music, and where the music that I was listening to, like excitedly listening to, and the music that I decided I wanted to play sort of became one. And then that's when things really streamlined. And so um, that's how I got into playing guitar as my
Okay.
instrument.
Okay. I'm aware that you're in a band as well.
Mhm.
So, how did you guys get together and decide to
Uh,
start playing?
yeah. Okay. I assume you mean Zepparella because
Yes.
I also do solo stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
So Zepparella, I met the drummer for Zepparella, Clementine, when she and I were playing actually in an AC/DC tribute band, which was like my first real band. Like I was, oh my gosh, so green when I was doing that. Like I really just started playing guitar. And Clementine wanted to start a Led Zeppelin um, tribute project. I think one because she loved the music of Led Zeppelin, which I did too, but also because we wanted to play more gigs than our bandmates in the AC/DC project wanted to play. So we kind of started it like, okay, if this band doesn't, if our main band doesn't want to take gigs, then we could offer, this Led Zeppelin tribute band, maybe for the same gig, so that we would be able to play more than our bandmates wanted. But they ended up thinking it was too much of a conflict of interest, so we got fired from the AC/DC project, and which was actually a great thing for the
Yeah.
Zeppelin project. So, yeah,
Okay. That's pretty exciting because Led
yeah,
Zeppelin's amazing, and so are CDC. So,
yeah. AC/DC too. I have to say, from the standpoint, nothing that has to do with like musical
hmm
hierarchy or anything, because I love both bands
yeah,
completely. But for a couple reasons, is one is my neck is way less sore after playing a Zepparella show. Like seriously, like anybody who has ever, I don't know, questioned Angus as a guitar player, I challenge them to play what Angus plays while doing what Angus does, and then get back to me on that,
yeah.
because
I
it is
understand.
very athletic. It's very taxing, and also I do enjoy with Zepparella being able to play such a wide variety of music. AC/DC, it's like they've got their
Yeah.
just perfect pizza-like formula. Like it's
Yes.
great every time, every way. Zeppelin, it kind of runs the gamut a bit more.
Yes. I agree with that definitely. So, what was your first show together like? Could you give me a bit about how you felt, like how it went and everything like that?
Zepparella's first show.
Yes.
Let me see. Okay. Oh, yes. Our first show was at the Red Devil Lounge in San Francisco, and it was with a previous lineup. So the only two people who have been in the band since the beginning are me and Clementine. So we've had a couple of different singers. We've had one other bass player. Currently, the singer's Noelle, and the bass player is Angeline Saris. And the first lineup ever was with two girls who were in Clementine's original band called Bottom. And we played, I remember it was so stressful because at the time I was living in San Diego, and Clementine just sent me like 15 songs and said, okay, we have our first show booked in 8 weeks. And I never played any Led Zeppelin. Again, I was super green. I'd been in like the AC/DC band for like, I think a year and a half. Like, so I was not by any means a seasoned professional. And, learning 15 Zeppelin songs it's not like learning 15 other other tunes. Like
No.
their arrangements are very specific.
Yes.
You're totally on holy ground as far as any fans are concerned. So it's like, yeah, you don't just play that solo kind of right. Like you better hit that solo as perfectly as you possibly can. So I just remember getting this list of 15 songs and locking myself in my room and doing nothing other than learning Zeppelin songs for 8 weeks. And then we had 2 rehearsals, and then we had our first show at the Red Devil Lounge in San Francisco. And it was, I don't remember all that much other than just trying to get through it because I was so stressed about it.
So how much time do you put aside, if you do put aside time, to practice for shows or learning new material?
Now with Zepparella, I don't do a lot of practicing of Zeppelin because we play enough shows that I keep the stuff pretty well under my fingers. If we decide to so we'll rotate a set list.
Okay.
Meaning that we'll kind of have maybe 15 songs or so that we kind of stick with for, I don't know, a month or 2 or something like that. Some songs are easy enough to rotate in and out, but if it's something that is a lot of memorization, like a lot of just guitar soloing, then I'll review it a bit, before we play it. And then usually we'll run it at sound check unless it's like a brand new song, and then we'll do a rehearsal. But I mean, in general, for my own personal practice, I like to play a minimum of 2 hours a day, and I'm happy if I can get in 4.
Can you tell me a bit about Abandon All Hope? I'm kind of interested. Like, I love the photo that you have too, so I'm kind of interested in that bit as well. But mostly the music. Did you have any inspirations behind it, or what made you decide to?
Yeah, so that project was brought to me as a concept by Michael Molenda. He is the guy who wrote the libretto. He also is editor-in-chief of Guitar Player magazine. He's a great guitar player himself. He's done just a million things. And he approached me when I didn't really know him. Like I knew sort of, obviously I knew who he was, but he had heard my first album, and one track in particular that was for solo violin, I guess, piqued his curiosity enough that he decided that he wanted to chat with me about this project that he had in the back of his mind for a while, which was like a musical interpretation of Dante's Inferno. And oddly enough, I had been really interested in going a similar direction anyway, not specifically with Dante, but with like combining literature with music. My first album, Hail Souls, has all these like references to like, Shakespeare plays that I love. And so when Michael came to me with this idea for doing this concept album based on like the different circles of Dante's underworld, I was like, oh my God, like this could not be more exactly the kind of thing I want to do. So right away, like I didn't need to think about it. I was like, I'm in totally. And then I just, I had already been studying composition a bit. I have a degree in music, but I knew that it's one thing to study something to be able to do well on a final, and another thing to actually take that information and translate it into something that is creative beyond just doing a final project or a final paper. I knew I was going to have to really own the material more. And so I had been studying with a composition teacher named Elizabeth Erickson, and I just, like, it just became the thing I did for a few years. It's just studying composition, writing, reading the Inferno a few times. And that was all I did for quite some time.
Yeah, I can definitely tell that you put a lot of work in it just from hearing you. And it's great that you do take your time and effort to put
Well, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I always want, I want anything that I do to be the best effort that I can give, knowing that I'm always working to grow and improve as a musician. All anybody can do is their best effort in that moment in time. Obviously, I hope to be a better guitar player tomorrow than I am today.
Yeah, what are your thoughts today on modern rock music? Like, how do you feel about it? How do you feel about how it's changed from like Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, Pink Floyd back then?
You could definitely probably get much more thorough and educated answers from other people. I have to confess that a lot of stuff I'm disconnected from, not because I want to be, but because I think it's easy if you're really focused on your own material to sometimes just like miss like these huge, awesome artists out there. Like I was totally late to the party with Muse. You know, my sister
Yes.
was the one who was like, Gretchen, sit down. Like, you have to listen to this. And I was like, oh, cool. So it's always so exciting when you find somebody who's current and awesome, doing amazing work. But I think my feeling really when it comes to music on a broader level is any type of music, I think, is inherently a good thing. Even if it isn't my cup of tea, that's fine. The way I see it is that having musical taste and preference is an indication of the abundance of options we have, which is wonderful. And people are doing so many awesome and creative things that I think now the biggest problem is in weeding through all of the information out there and finding what you love. You know, a lot of times I think people will say like, oh, there's not, great music nowadays. And I think my feeling is like, no, there absolutely is. It's just right now we have too many options. Not too many options. Now the fact that we're not having like record labels filter out all these other artists and independent artists can actually exist, there becomes this almost just overwhelming excess of options. And it's a question of weeding through the ones that maybe aren't your cup of tea to find the ones that blow your mind.
So in terms of that, like, because you mentioned Muse, so I was just curious what kind of bands you're listening to right now. You don't have to list a favorite because that's way too hard of a question, but yeah.
No. Let me see. It's actually funny. Right now I've been listening to a lot of like more like composers.
Okay.
Like I was just listening to like a Bartok, and I've been studying Mozart string quartets and a number of different things. I love recently Lari Basilio, amazing guitar player. She's from Brazil. She's so good. Oh my God. Daniele Gottardo, who worked with me on my album on the artistic production, his music just is in constant. I listen to it every day. It's like so incredible. He combines like electric guitar with composed music, which is actually why we met. Somebody who knew what we were both working on was like, you two need to go geek out on guitar and counterpoint. So I've been listening to a lot of that, but it's kind of all over the place. And recently, it's a cool thing when you have a lot of like friends who are putting out albums and stuff. You're constantly getting great new music. Clementine, the drummer for Zepparella, has a new project called Beau Chevaux, and their album hasn't even been released yet. And I listened to it the other day and was like so blown away, so proud of her. Such an eclectic and interesting album, and her lyrics are just like, oh, so good. So lots of different stuff. Neely Brosh too, who's another great guitar player and good friend of mine. She's such a great, artist all around.
In terms of yourself as an artist, if I was to ask you where you see yourself as a musician, as a guitarist in, I don't know, 5 years' time, where do you think you would be?
I hope that I want to continue to learn and grow. If I think about where I was 5 years ago with my first album, and I don't say this in any way to be disparaging against it, because I think if you do something that's honest and the best representation of what you can do at the time, it's always going to hold true to you in some way, even if you can look back on it and see it as like, oh, that's sort of like a musical baby picture of me. So if I think that like from my first album to my second album was 5 years, I would love to have just as much, if not greater, growth in terms of as a guitar player, a composer, as a human. I'm a big believer in that who you are becomes how you play and what you write, and just as much, it's just as worthwhile to focus on being, a good person as it is to be a good musician.
In terms of your music, what do you think has been the biggest challenge for you as a musician in today's industry?
Yeah, to me, my Achilles heel, and it's funny, it's like a lot of times I feel like musicians don't want to talk about the things that they aren't at. But I'd rather everybody just talk about it. I feel like I suck at improvising. And I think a lot of that comes from having a classical background where improvisation really isn't part of it. And then going and playing in tribute bands where what's most appreciated is very accurate representations of the songs and solos that people know and love. And so as a result, it's something that even though it's like, yeah, I could sit down, I could tell somebody else, hey, these are effective strategies for improvising. I can go through and I can play something and hit the right notes. But I think the goal that I have is not just relying on licks, not relying on theory, but actually having a more direct connection between my creative center and my fingers. And that's just I don't know, maybe for some people it happens easily. For me, it's been a much more laborious process, and one where it's a little bit more nebulous to work on, because like if it's say it's a difficult lick that's just fast and requires a lot of accuracy, it's like I know how to do that. I sit down with a metronome and I play it really slowly for a really long time, and then little by little I go faster until I have it at tempo. But improvisation by its nature isn't practiced. I mean, you can practice the act of improvising, but you can't, it's inherently spontaneous. So it kind of goes against a lot of the training I've had for like, this is how you work on something. So it's, that's the area that I have found to be the most challenging.
I have some questions that a couple people have sent me that I'm just going to ask you. So
go ahead. Yeah.
When is your next show with Zepparella?
That is an easy question, and I know the answer to it. We're going to be in Colorado. We're going to be in Bellevue, in Aspen, at the Belly Up, and in Denver, and that's April 20th, 21st, and 22nd.
Okay, perfect. And the other question was from one of your fans that wants to know, are you going to consider coming to Texas?
Well, yes, of course. I love Texas. I've been to Texas. We've toured in Texas before. The question always is not our willingness. It's more just a question of schedules and stuff like that. But we played in Austin. We played in Dallas. We played in Houston. We played a number of places in Texas.
So I just have one more question for you. Okay. If you were in a room with bands, maybe full-on female bands that wanted to start up in today's music industry as a band, what is some advice that you would give them?
For female bands specifically?
Yes.
Okay, I think the first bit of advice I would give is don't get a chip on your shoulder. Don't buy into the them or us. There are wonderful human beings of either gender, and there are crappy human beings of either gender out there. So don't deliberately add to the division. Now, having said that, I would say it's easy to play into a victim role if that's how you identify yourself, and it doesn't mean that you're not going to encounter people who have some pretty backwards ideas. But there are ideas in this world today that are far more backwards than people having a hard time grasping, the abilities of female musicians. And as long as those far worse ideas abound, you're still going to have people with backwards ideas. So I would say focus on just being a creative person, being good at what you do, developing the skills that you want to have to play the music you want to play. Don't limit yourself. Don't buy into flattery, but also don't buy into abuse. And try to just set high standards for yourself, work hard to get there, enlist teachers, enlist mentors, and above almost everything, choose camaraderie over competition. Don't see other musicians, especially female musicians, don't see them as your competition. See them as your friends, your comrades, your allies. There's so much more power in that. I love that so many of my heroes are also my friends who are also amazing guitar players, and I can learn from them. I can call Neely Roche and take a lesson on improvisation from her. I can bug Larry Basilio to teach me that cool new finger picking thing she did. There's so much more strength in that and so much more positivity in it. And there's enough room in the world for all of us. So just focus on doing what you're set out to do.